What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Timeless Movie Podcast, episode number 97. My name is Victor Vasquez. Appreciate you joining me on another discussion, another journey into watching a new movie where we discuss what we liked and didn't like, what was our favorite moments of a new film that just came out in theaters or in streaming. Not only do I give you my pros and cons, but I also give you a recommendation whether you should check it out immediately, like going straight to your nearest theater to watch this movie, or waiting for it in streaming, or maybe even skipping it. And then also at the end of this podcast, I give a little extra segment where I decide whether I consider this movie timeless. Is it something that I would rewatch over and over again and add to my collection? Before we dive into this week's episode, I do want to let you know that episode 96 is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you like to listen or watch. It is on there. Look up Timeless Movie Podcast. Give us a follow. I'd be really appreciative. That way we can discuss and interact about different movies that end up coming out in the future. For episode 96, I talked about the new movie Here, which is directed by Robert Zemeckis, and it stars Tom Hanks and Robin Wright. It's actually the reunion of these three individuals that were part of the big hit movie Forrest Gump. So definitely check that audio or video out and let me know in those comments or in the reviews. Let me know what you thought about the podcast as a whole, as well as what you thought about Here and whether you consider it timeless. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into this week's episode. We're going to be talking about Sean Baker's new movie, Anora. I'll be honest, before checking this movie out, I actually had not seen any trailers in the theaters. So anytime I would go throughout 2024, did not see any kind of marketing for this movie. The only way I heard about it was actually through word of mouth, through social media, through different types of movie review podcasts that I also listened to, and everybody kept proclaiming that Anora was one of the best movies of the year and also one of the funniest. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do it. We haven't had a really good comedy other than, I guess, in my opinion, Deadpool and Wolverine is probably the funniest movie that I've seen this year. So I was really excited. Like I wanted to see a different type of a genre, something that isn't action or horror, and hoping to at least add another kind of a film that's a different flavor to my top 10 list of 2024 so far. So again, no trailers, no type of context other than just what people were stating about Anora, that it was just a incredible story, just a very fun and enjoyable watch. So this past week, I went to go watch it with my brother, and let's go ahead and now transition into the non-spoiler thoughts now that I got to check it out in theaters. All right, Anora for me was a great movie. As soon as I left the theaters, I was just blown away in that how much of a blast I had watching the film. Once again, I was really surprised that there was so much buzz around this movie. And again, when I say buzz, I mean more so from just, the little bubble that I'm in regards to other people that talk about movies and social media accounts that I follow about movies. Or in that bubble, there's just a lot of buzz of people talking about how great this movie was. And so I didn't want my expectations to be too high. So I try to limit that. That way I wouldn't be let down after the movie. And they knocked it out of the park for me. I enjoyed the entire movie. There are some slow parts, and we'll get to that a little bit in the cons and the spoiler section. But if I were to say what I enjoyed most about this movie, it had to be the fun story and where it kind of just takes you along this 2 hour and I think 15-minute ride that you're on. The great performances by the actors and some hilarious interactions that take place throughout the second act and even the first act as well. But those three things just made this such a fun and awesome watch for me. Again, not perfect. There's a couple of things that will well, not really, not a couple, just one thing that I'll call out a little bit later. But overall, Nora was just a fun and awesome movie to watch in theaters. Let's go through the synopsis a little bit just to kind of get an idea as to folks that maybe have not seen Anora, what the movie's about. The movie follows a stripper that works in New York City, and her name is Annie. Her full name is Anora, but she goes by the nickname of Annie. And you immediately start the film just in the strip club. It's called the HQ, and you're just kind of seeing her and other dancers just kind of talking to different type of men that come to the strip club. You see Annie in these situations where she's just having these very similar conversations. It's very small talk. She's just talking to these guys, telling them, like, hey, would you want to go get a dance here? Would you want to go to this room here? And, you're just seeing that play out over the first couple of minutes, just kind of seeing I guess, a day in the life of Annie. And then it's all just very straightforward. And then all of a sudden, everything changes as Annie is brought to meet a young Russian man that is named Ivan, or he goes by the name of Vanya. He's 21 years old, very young, but has a lot of money. He is actually the son of a very famous or a well known oligarch in Russia. And so he's got a lot of money. He's in the US to study. And Annie and Vanya end up hitting it off. They end up kind of having a little, obviously a lot of fun in regards to them being in the strip club. But it eventually goes into a little bit deeper of a relationship where Vanya ends up asking Annie, hey, like, come hang out with me, come to my house. I have a mansion here in Brooklyn. And you start seeing their relationship grow little by little. Obviously, it starts off as just being a transaction. You have Vanya kind of just asking Annie, like, hey, I'll pay you for a week. You don't have to go to the strip club. You could just be here in my mansion. We'll have fun. We'll go out. They go to Vegas. They go to impromptu trips. And then eventually it all leads to the moment where, when they're in Vegas, Vanya ends up proposing and wanting to marry Annie. And so you see it just as like a very fun tale of two young individuals. I believe Annie in the movie's only 23 and Vanya's 21. So again, they're just having a wild, reckless time, enjoying their youth. And you think, okay, well, how is it all going to really wrap up? And then you eventually get to the point where you find out that Vanya's parents actually do not like the news of what they heard. They're famous oligarchs, so they work for different types of institutions and they have political influence. So they do not want to see any rumors in the news about their son marrying this exotic dancer, and they basically start calling her a prostitute, which offends Annie throughout the movie a lot. And you start seeing the entire kind of story play out where the main goal of Vanya's family is to basically annul the marriage. And then you have Annie who is trying to fight back and saying, no, this is real love. I really do love Vanya. This relationship is not going to get annulled in any way. I don't want a divorce. And you start seeing a lot of different things play out in the story as you start to notice that, is this relationship really real? Is it artificial in some way? Again, it started with a transaction, and a lot of things you start seeing a bunch of shenanigans on the screen. So really fun story. I'm not going to spoil too much. Again, this is the non-spoiler section of it, but wanted to give you an idea as to what is taking place in the movie. Overall, I freaking enjoyed Anora. It probably is one of the funnier movies of 2024. And I would say that I'd highly recommend, if you guys have a chance and if it's in a local theater for AMC, Regal, Cinemark, anywhere you got one, go check it out. It's a lot of fun. It is very, adult themed. Again, Annie is a stripper and she's in the strip club at various times. So again, wouldn't recommend that to go with your parents in any way, or any kids. Just, if you just know that before you end up watching that movie. But other than that, it's just a such an enjoyable story that you follow through, and you get to kind of experience what Annie kind of goes through in this very weird situation with Vanya and his family. So definitely go check it out. Again, if you have a local theater near you that you're able to watch it. If not, as soon as it comes to streaming, also check it out as well. All right, let's go ahead and now dive into some spoiler talk in regards to Anora. So, if you have not seen Anora, please jump out the video, watch the movie, then jump back in. And wherever you listen to the podcast, put it down below in the comments. That way we can interact and really see if we agree or disagree on some of our thoughts about this movie. All right, hopefully that gave you guys enough time. Let's go ahead and jump into the first pro that I had about Anora. I got to call it out, and it's going to be a very weird pro, but the entire second act of this movie was, to me, incredible. It was so hilarious, the interactions that Annie had to be put in. So Annie is played by Mikey Madison, and she ends up getting into the situation where Vanya, admits that, hey, well, my parents, because of their position in Russia, they actually don't want me to get married, and if they say that it would look bad on the family name that I would get married to someone like you. And they keep calling her a prostitute, even though again she's not really a prostitute. And so that really pisses off Annie. And then all of a sudden, you get to meet three new individuals within the film. You get to meet Vanya's godfather named Taurus, and then he has a couple of other accomplices. Their names are Garnick and Igor. And so these three individuals come to the house, and you start noticing like these just funny interactions where Vanya eventually just runs away. He doesn't want to go back to Russia, which is one of the reasons why he got married to Annie, because again, he wanted to kind of get that green card and have to almost get an escape from having to go back home. And then you have these individuals that are trying to chase down Vanya, which are his godfather and his accomplices. And then all of a sudden, Vanya just disappears. He runs away, he escapes. And now you have this very awkward situation where you see Toros, you have Garnick, and you have Igor, and in the house is Annie. Vanya didn't even think about Annie at all. He just left and just completely deserted her. And now she's in a very weird position where she has to work with these three men that want to annul her marriage with Vanya. And they have to try to find Vanya wherever he is in New York City. And so it almost becomes like a buddy cop type of a movie or a buddy team movie where you have four individuals that are just they're all so opposites. You have Toros, who is again the godfather of Vanya. He is very serious. He's always talking very loud. He's frustrated and scared because he doesn't know what Vanya's parents are going to do to him if he doesn't find their son and annul the wedding. You have Garnick, who ends up getting a broken nose because he tried to get Annie and stop her from running. Eventually, got his nose kicked in, and then he has a bloody nose and can't breathe throughout the entire movie. Then you have Igor. Igor's kind of like the muscle of the group, and he's really the only one that you kind of see that actually cares about Annie, but has to kind of put her in very awkward situations. And so all this stuff is kind of going on. And the second act is, like I mentioned, you're just seeing these four individuals drive around New York, going to different restaurants, visiting Vanya's friends, trying to find him, trying to see where this kid went. And as you go along, every character has their own moments that just make you laugh. It's just hilarious. And he just keeps giving these three individuals attitude. It's just so much fun. And again, it has the funniest moments in this second act. All of it, all the funny moments and scenes that I remember are from this second act where all these four individuals are together. And it was again the best part of the movie for me. Maybe after you guys watch it, maybe you guys would disagree with me a little bit, but that second act, the way that the characters interacted with each other, the things that they were saying, it was all so hilarious. So that's my first pro. Second pro is actually, still similar to like what happened in the second act, but I got to call out the writing and the dialogue. Everything that they said in regards to Toros, to Garnick, to Igor, to Annie, the four of them, their interactions, their dialogue was just so good because everything felt believable. Nothing felt out of place of what each character was saying. Like I mentioned, Annie, played by Mikey Madison, she had a great Brooklyn accent and she just had this attitude, this confidence about her. Everything that each character is saying is just it just works so well. But also because the families are Russian, and one of the things that I forgot to mention at the beginning is Annie also speaks a little Russian. And so you sometimes have these characters talking in Russian, talking in English. Sometimes the characters are talking over each other. And I love when movies or TV shows can pull that off. Too many times, really in a lot of mediums, when you watch a movie or when you watch a show, it's always my turn to talk, their turn to talk, my turn to talk, their turn to talk. And nobody ever interrupts each other. In this movie, the dialogue just feels so realistic. Like you're actually there with these four individuals in a car having this very tense conversation, and people are interrupting each other. Sometimes you go from English to Russian, then Russian to English. It just nailed it when it came to the believability of what they were saying in the actual film. And again, it did not distract me at all when it came to their conversations kind of overlapping each other. Really got to call that out. I really enjoyed that piece of it. And then last but not least, the third pro that I have for Anora is the story overall. It's such a fun but simple story. Like I mentioned in the non-spoiler thoughts, what I described was really the movie. You have Annie, she meets Vanya, they get married, and then eventually his family comes and wants to annul the wedding, or not the wedding, but the marriage. And then all of a sudden Vanya disappears, and then Annie has to basically work with Vanya's family to find him. They get the marriage annulled, and then eventually Annie has to go back to her normal life. That's the story. But there's so many different things that go on within the film that just make it much more enjoyable. Like I mentioned, some of that has to do with the writing and the dialogue that just works so well. I also loved the way that they would set up a lot of different types of things. Like I mentioned before, you have Igor, who is really like the sweet guy of the Vanya's family, and he's really the only one that cares about Annie. And you see that on how the filmmaker ended up kind of starting to set up the seeds of what was going to occur at the end of the movie. you see Igor just being very uncomfortable at the beginning with Annie. He wants to be very respectful. But throughout the movie, you get to see more and more glances and more shots of Igor and what he really thinks about Annie. And you eventually see that in a conversation that they have by the end of the film. And it just works so well of how they set it up. And to me, it was telegraphed. I saw it coming. I knew that by the end of the movie, Igor and Annie were going to have some type of a relationship, but I just really appreciated that how they set it up, and it felt like they nailed the execution of it. So that's just one of the things again that I really enjoyed about the story. Also got to call out at the end of the movie, the film ends on Annie being taken home after all this chaos for the last 2 weeks by Igor. Again, Igor's the sweet guy that actually cared about Annie. Igor ends up taking her home, drops off her bags, and then he does one last gesture, which is basically give her the wedding ring that they took from her as like, a last gift of like, hey, they annulled the marriage, but hey, here, this is still your ring. And he gives it to her. And then Annie gets on top of him, gets on his lap. They start making out. They look like they're about to have sex. And then Annie just breaks down crying in tears. And at that moment, in my interpretation was, Annie just had a crazy 2 weeks. She had been, at least in her mind, thinking that she was going to have a great relationship with Vanya. She was going to get married. She was going to have a very lavish life. And then all of a sudden, it all kind of comes crumbling down, and she's probably going to have to go back to the strip club or work some other type of job. And so, in my mind, I thought, and because of her performance throughout the 2 weeks that she was with Vanya, never did she break down and cry. She was always with this strong attitude. She had this presence of her of like she was never going to back down, not even to Vanya's parents, not to her godfather, not to anybody. She was not going to give any ground. And so she always had this kind of wall up against anybody that she was meeting. And all of a sudden, this is the first moment where you see her kind of break down. And so I just thought it was more from the perspective of, hey, like, she just had a crazy 2 weeks. And now she's actually having a very cool and honest conversation with somebody. And then she just kind of finally is able to let it go and not be behind a wall and not put up a face. But my brother Omar actually came up with a great point that I actually believe is an even better sense of the interpretation. He feels that this is actually Annie's first real interaction with somebody that is not artificial. And what my brother kind of explained, and I completely agree, is at the beginning of the movie, it starts off with Annie just having artificial relationships, artificial conversations, small talk with these men at the strip club. None of it is real. None of it leads to anything. It's all just to kind of get some money. And for the men, it's just to kind of get some type of enjoyment. But none of it is real. But at the end of the movie, when Annie sees how much Igor cares for her and what he was willing to do to protect her and make sure that she actually, at least got something out of this annulled marriage, it showed her that this is actually what true love might be. And so she just started breaking down and crying. That's what my brother's kind of interpretation is, but I really enjoyed that. I did not pick up on that kind of an aspect, but I just wanted to call that out. And again, let me know what you guys think. If you guys had a chance to see Anora, did you guys get that same feeling at the end of the story, and why Annie broke down? Definitely would love to hear your guys' thoughts on an interpretation on that ending as well. But just wanted to call out that specific ending that my brother saw when he watched the movie as well. So, guys, those are my pros in regards to Anora. I do have one con. I kind of mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, but I did feel that after we got such a great second act, there was, again, a great feeling of these four characters: Annie, Toros, Garnick, and Igor. Eventually they start off by hating each other, and then by the end of the second act, they still kind of hate each other, but you can see that they still kind of respect each other a little bit more. And then you get to the third act when the marriage is annulled, and now Annie has to go back to her home and her real life. And it kind of just slows down very much. There's a lot of scenes that just kind of last a little bit longer. Conversations are a lot slower. And so it becomes more of like how I was mentioning before, where like how normal mediums have it, where it's one person having a conversation, then another person. That's what ended up happening. And I completely understand why they had to slow it down. You had to kind of set up the emotion of what Igor and Annie were hoping to execute and achieve by the end of the movie. So again, I get why they may have wanted to slow it down, but for me, it kind of took me out of it just because it started dragging a little bit too much, and I started really feeling the runtime of the movie. So That's the only unfortunate part, and that's more of a nitpick. Again, I still overall enjoyed the movie, but had to call out that for me in the third act, it does slow down significantly. All right, let's go ahead and wrap this up by putting out some more positive stuff about the movie Anora. I want to start off with my favorite performance. This one is very simple, straightforward. Mikey Madison as Annie, she was incredible. She, like I mentioned a little bit before in one of my pros, she had such a great attitude about her. She would never let anybody get something over her. She always was in a great position to either reply to something, come back with something, and she was again never letting any of her ground go. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. She always had this kind of confidence. It wasn't like a kind of like a cocky or arrogant kind of confidence. She just believed in herself so much and knew who she was. So really enjoyed Mikey Madison's performance. It was incredible. And then again, just all leading up to the ending where she just kind of breaks down just because of the hellish 2 weeks that she had to experience of thinking that she was married, then she wasn't married. It was just so incredible. And she also had some very funny lines. One thing that I wanted to call out of again how funny this movie was is it wasn't funny because of the jokes that they were saying. There wasn't any jokes. It was more so again the writing, the dialogue. They just had such funny lines. The way that Mikey Madison would deliver lines as Annie or as other characters would deliver the lines, it was just so funny. But again, I was just really impressed and a really great performance by Mikey Madison, and she gets my favorite performance of Anora. All right, favorite moment. I kind of teased this already in one of my pros, but any scene that involves Annie traveling with Toros, Garnick, and Igor, that's gonna get my favorite scene and moment of the film. They has the funniest lines. You get to see some wild stuff. Somebody throwing up, somebody having to kind of rip their car off of a tow truck. You just experience so many things with these four individuals, and it was just something that completely caught me off guard. I was not expecting this kind of a movie to kind of show me that, and it delivered and executed in really good ways. And I think what works so well is they're able to make you care about these four characters, especially for Toros, Garnick, and Igor. Three characters that you up to that point of when they get introduced, you have no clue who they are. But by the end, you're just really caring about these four individuals. So really good stuff. So anything that involves Annie, Toros, Garrick, and Igor traveling around trying to find Vanya, that's my favorite moment. And then favorite shot, I actually really like the shot of Vanya and Annie when they're in Fremont Street. They just got married. They're celebrating again. They're kind of showing that very youthful energy, and they're in Fremont Street in Las Vegas, and you could just kind of see them under the big Fremont screen. If you guys have been to Vegas, down in like Old Town Vegas, they have this Fremont Street, and it has like a nice little light show at the top in the ceiling. And so there's like a shot that just looks really cool of both of them just kind of laughing and enjoying their marriage. And just, you just kind of see them kind of representing the youthful energy that they still have. And you think it's going to have a happy ending, but it really doesn't. But really enjoyed that specific shot. So that's got to be probably the one shot that really kind of stands out for me after I watched Anora. All right, everybody. Now that we kind of got through all of that pros and cons and favorite things that I enjoyed about Anora, it is time for me to decide whether this film is timeless. Could I see myself rewatching Anora over and over again and adding it to my collection? This has been tough. I'm not going to lie. I've been on the fence ever since I got out of the theaters to watch this movie. When it comes to funny movies and funny interactions and hilarious moments, those typically do rank a little bit higher for me because again, that funny interaction, the hilarious moments that characters are getting into, those are typically moments that even if you rewatch it over and over again, it still has that same kind of value that just makes you laugh. But if I had to choose whether it is timeless as of today, I'm on the fence, but I think I'm leaning towards Anora is not a timeless movie for me. I will say though, and I feel like I get the option to change my mind in the future. I completely know that I'm going to rewatch this eventually. Probably will rewatch this with my girlfriend or even recommend it to other friends to check this out. But I don't know. It's just again, at the moment, I feel like it is a funny movie. I do feel like the ending kind of drags and it just makes it feel like, oh man, when I watch it again, I'm already going to be looking forward to like, dang, we have to really kind of suffer through a little bit of that third act of it slowing down. That's the only unfortunate part. And I never want to feel that when I rewatch a movie. when I rewatch a classic movie that I really enjoy, I never want to be thinking about the moment of like, oh, I can't wait for the slowdown. I want to be thinking about the awesome moments, the great music, the great performances. So, again, as of today, I will say that Anora is not a timeless movie, and I can definitely see myself flip flopping on this one multiple times as well. But like I always say, guys, this is just my opinion. What about you guys? What did you think about Anora? Have you had a chance to check it out in theaters? If you have, let me know down below. Definitely would love to interact with you guys about this film. I had such a great time. I hope you guys had a great time watching it. So, again, put those down below in the comments. Let's go ahead and interact around this movie and let me know what you thought about this film. All right, everybody. Appreciate you guys staying all the way through to listen to my thoughts on Anora. My name is Victor Vasquez. This has been episode number 97 of the Timeless Movie Podcast. Make sure to check out next week's episode as we're going to be covering one of two movies. That's right. Two movies are coming out next weekend. It's going to be Gladiator 2 and Wicked. Super excited for this upcoming weekend. And yes, I will be discussing both movies as well. So make sure to, again, if you're not subscribed, make sure to subscribe to the videos and to the channel. That way you guys can come back and listen to my thoughts of those two films. All right, everybody. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you guys later.